The stars above Earth glimmered with a quiet serenity that seemed so far removed from the chaos that now awaited humanity. The world was at peace, but that peace was fragile, a delicate balance that had been maintained by diplomacy and careful alliances. But everything changed the day the Galactic Council made a decision that Earth would never accept. The message came through official channels, encoded and delivered with cold authority. It was simple, direct, and unforgiving. Earth's military forces were to be disbanded. The Council, a powerful collective of alien civilizations, had decided that Earth was too dangerous, too unpredictable to maintain the military strength they had built over the years. The people of Earth were no longer allowed to protect themselves. The Council's decision was based on fear that humanity's growing influence was too much for the galaxy to ignore. It had been years since Earth's space exploration had begun, and its military advancements were outpacing the Council's expectations. But the idea of a single species holding such power over the stars was too much for the Council to bear. They decided to disarm Earth forcefully, and to treat the humans as lesser beings, inferior in a galaxy of powers far greater. On Earth's surface, Director Gavin Cross sat in his office, his eyes glued to the screen as he read the Galactic Council's message for the third time. He had seen countless political decisions in his career, but nothing had prepared him for this. The Galactic Council had crossed a line. He leaned forward, his voice shaking with barely contained rage as he spoke to his assistant. "Tell Admiral Kara Miles to prepare the fleet. Earth will never surrender. We fight back, no matter the cost." The assistant hesitated, clearly uneasy. "But sir, the Council has the power to cut off all our resources. If we defy them, I don't care," Cross interrupted, his voice firm. "Earth won't be controlled by anyone, not even the Galactic Council. We've built this world with our own hands and no one is taking it from us." Far away on the bridge of the Vengeance, Earth's flagship, Admiral Kara Miles stood looking out into space. The vastness of it always had a way of making her feel small. But today, she felt anything but small. She felt fury burning in her chest. The message from the Council was clear, and it was a message of domination. Earth was being forced into submission. Her officers were stationed at their posts, but Kara knew they were all thinking the same thing. The Council had crossed the line. They had taken away Earth's right to defend itself. They were telling humanity that they were no longer worthy of standing shoulder to shoulder with the galaxy's greatest powers. Kara's fingers brushed over the control panel, a decision weighing heavily on her. "Prepare the fleet for full mobilization," she ordered, her voice steady but filled with an undercurrent of emotion. "We're not going to wait for them to make the next move. We'll make our own path." Back on Earth, Dr. Selena March, a scientist working at the Earth Defense Research Facility, watched the news unfold in disbelief. The Galactic Council's decision had rocked the planet, and she could feel the tension in the air. People were terrified, but some were outraged, and others, like herself, felt a burning need to fight back. It was time to remind the galaxy why Earth had fought to stand tall, why it had never been ruled by others. She quickly gathered her team, and they began work on activating a secret project humanity had long kept hidden, an advanced defensive system. Humanity's brightest minds had worked on it for years in case something like this ever happened, but no one had ever expected it would come so soon. Now it was their only chance to resist the Council's decree. "We will not bow to the Council," Dr. March muttered as she adjusted the settings on the control panel. "If they want a war, they'll get one." On the Council's flagship, the leaders of the galaxy watched as Earth's response began to unfold. They had believed humanity would be too weak to challenge them, that Earth would simply fall in line. But as they saw Earth's military fleet mobilizing, their eyes narrowed. The humans had no intention of submitting. "We must act quickly," the ZEC representative said, her voice dripping with cold certainty. "If they resist, we must crush them before they get the chance to fight back." But not all of the Council was in agreement. A voice from the back of the room spoke out. "Let them try. We've already taken away their power. Let's see if they truly believe they are a force to be reckoned with." Back on Earth, the first shots were fired. The Vengeance led the charge, with Earth's entire military fleet following close behind. Kara Miles stood at the helm, her face hard with resolve. She had crossed the line before, but this time there was no turning back. The battle for Earth's freedom had begun. Humanity's rage had been sparked by the Council's decision, and now, the entire galaxy would know that Earth would never be treated as lesser again. The message had been sent. Humanity would not bend to anyone's will. The war for Earth's sovereignty had begun. The message from the Galactic Council had already sent shockwaves across Earth, but Director Gavin Cross knew that the true impact would come when the people of Earth learned about the disarmament order. The Council's attempt to control Earth had awakened something in humanity that had long been dormant: rage. The response was swift and furious. On the streets of Earth's major cities, from New York to Shanghai, protests erupted. But these weren't just protests, they were a call to arms. People weren't just angry, they were ready to fight for their freedom. For the first time in a long while, humanity had a common enemy. And it wasn't just the Council, it was anyone who believed they could control Earth. In the heart of Earth's military command center, Admiral Kara Miles stood with her hands clenched, staring at the screen in front of her. Earth's defenses were on high alert, but she knew the fight would be different now. Humanity was united, but the stakes were higher than ever. The Council's decree to strip Earth of its military was a direct challenge to their sovereignty, and Kara wouldn't back down. "Prepare the fleet," Kara ordered, her voice cold and filled with determination. "We will not comply with this decision." Her officers, standing at attention around her, gave silent nods. They had trained for years, preparing for any scenario that could threaten Earth's safety. But none of them had ever imagined they'd be fighting against the galactic powers who once saw Earth as nothing more than a tiny, insignificant planet. Far above Earth's surface in space, the Vengeance, Earth's flagship, was readying for battle. The human fleet was being assembled, and it was unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. The ships were equipped with the latest technology, but it wasn't the weapons or the ships that made humanity strong. It was their resolve. This time, they weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for their freedom. Admiral Kara Miles stood at the helm of the Vengeance, watching as the fleet prepared to leave Earth's orbit. She knew the Council's fleet was already en route, but humanity had learned long ago that the only way to win was to stand together. This would not be an easy fight, but it was one they were prepared for. Back on Earth, Dr. Selena March watched the live reports from the Galactic Council's capital. As a scientist, she had always believed in peaceful negotiations, in finding ways to avoid conflict. But now, as she watched the Council's arrogant decision unfold, something inside her shifted. The Council had crossed the line. She had been working on a top-secret defense project for years, an ancient technology that could protect Earth. She hadn't believed it would be needed so soon. But now, with the Council's threats becoming real, she knew it was time to activate it. The project would give Earth an edge, something the Council couldn't foresee. But time was running out. Across Earth, the military and civilians began to prepare for what was coming. New recruits signed, up to defend their planet, and weapons from the hidden caches were brought to light. The world was united in a way it had never been before. Earth's military might was ready to face the Council, and this time, humanity wasn't just standing on the defensive. They were taking the fight to the stars. The Council's military fleet, led by General Zarak, was already on the move. They had underestimated humanity before, thinking that Earth was too young, too disorganized to ever challenge the galactic powers, but they had miscalculated. Humanity's rage was a power that no one had foreseen. The Council ships entered Earth's atmosphere with overwhelming force, their massive fleets blocking the skies. They had come to end the rebellion before it could start, to show Earth's leaders that defiance would not be tolerated. But Kara Miles and her fleet had other plans. They were ready, and they would not be cowed. As the battle began, the human fleet clashed with the Council's forces, the stars above Earth lighting up with flashes of energy as the first volleys of fire erupted. Ships collided, and space itself seemed to tremble with the force of the battle. But Earth's fleet was more than a match for the Council's forces. They were faster, smarter, and more determined. Kara Miles stood at the center of the Vengeance's bridge, watching as her crew moved with precision. The human fleet was unstoppable. Every shot, every maneuver was a calculated move in the fight for Earth's future. The Galactic Council had thought humanity was a weakened species, but now they would learn the hard way that Earth's people would never submit. Back in the command center, Director Gavin Cross stood in front of a live feed, watching the battle unfold. His heart raced, but there was a sense of peace within him. Earth had drawn a line, and they were no longer willing to back down. The battle for Earth's freedom had begun, and humanity would no longer be silenced by the powers that sought to control them. The message was simple: humanity fights for its future, and they would never be treated as lesser beings again. The rage that had been simmering for so long had finally exploded, and Earth was no longer just a planet under the heel of the Galactic Council. It was a force to be reckoned with. The galaxy would never look at Earth the same way again. The battle had just begun, and Earth's future was now in their hands. The stars above Earth burned bright, but below, on the surface of the planet, the rage of humanity simmered, about to explode in a way the galaxy had never seen before. The Galactic Council had crossed a line, and Earth's response was swift and brutal. The first confrontation between Earth and the Council's military might had shaken the stars themselves. Ships of light and dark collided, their powerful weapons tearing into the very fabric of space. The battle was a shockwave, felt across every system. On Earth, people didn't wait for orders. They took action. Citizens rallied, workers left their posts, and families packed their homes, all joining the fight for their freedom. Humanity had nothing left to lose. Admiral Kara Miles stood at the bridge of the Vengeance, her eyes steely and focused. The battle was far from over. The Council's ships were larger, more powerful, but humanity's fleet was fueled by rage, and there was nothing more dangerous than an entire species united in defiance. Kara turned to her officers. "This is our chance to show the galaxy who we are. We fight not just for Earth, but for every world that believes in freedom." Her officers nodded in agreement. There was no turning back now. The human fleet surged forward, propelled by sheer willpower. The Vengeance led the charge, its weapons firing with pinpoint accuracy, tearing through the Council ships one by one. Each shot, each explosion was a message. Humanity would never submit. But the Council had underestimated the determination of humanity. The Council fleet was strong, but it had been too slow to react to the ferocity of Earth's strike. The humans didn't fight like soldiers. They fought like people who had been pushed too far, who had been told they didn't matter, and now they were showing the universe what that really meant. Across Earth, people were starting to see the real impact of the battle. The military conflict had spilled into the streets as civilians joined the effort, using anything they could find to fight back. Old equipment, makeshift weapons, and a new fire had been lit within humanity. In New York, thousands stood outside, watching the sky, their faces filled with both terror and pride. The battle in the stars was now a battle for Earth, and every citizen knew that they were a part of it. Dr. Selena March watched from the window of the Earth Defense Research Facility. She had spent years working in secrecy, developing a plan she hoped humanity would never need. But as the battle raged on, she realized that it was time to activate the project she had kept hidden, the defensive system that would turn the tide of the war. With quick movements, she activated the system. "We need every available resource now," she said, her voice steady. "If we don't stop them here, we won't have a home to fight for." In the vastness of space, the human fleet began to push back against the overwhelming Council forces. But the Council was fighting back with everything they had. Large-scale blasts shook the battlefield as both sides exchanged fire with deadly force. Admiral Kara Miles gripped the controls, steering the Vengeance into a flank attack. The human ships were smaller, more nimble, and each human ship carried with it the strength of thousands who had fought and died for freedom. The Council, with all its power and resources, was slowly losing its grip on the battle. But in the heat of battle, Kara's face tightened. General Zarak, a ruthless leader of the Council's fleet, had launched an all-out assault. He would not stop until humanity was crushed. On the ground, General Thomas Graves was still dealing with the betrayal he had caused. He had turned his back on Earth, siding with the Council, believing their promise of power would be worth the cost of Earth's sovereignty. But as he watched the human fleet carve through the Council's ships, something changed within him. Graves realized the truth. The Council was not a savior, and humanity was not meant to be ruled. He had made a mistake, one he couldn't undo. Now he was stuck between two impossible choices: surrender to Earth's fight for freedom or face the full wrath of humanity's rage. Back in the heart of the battle, Dr. March's system activation began to show results. A pulse of energy surged through the human ships, enhancing their weapons and shields. Humanity's last secret weapon had just been unleashed. The Council ships, once untouchable, were now being damaged. Their defenses cracked, their fleets dwindling, but the battle wasn't over. The final strike was still to come. Humanity's rage had created an unstoppable force, but the galaxy had yet to see the full power of what Earth could achieve. The darkness of space seemed to tremble with every shot fired as Admiral Kara Miles commanded her forces to deliver the final blow. She knew the fight was far from over, but humanity had already shown the universe that it was no longer weak. We are Earth. We will fight for our future. We will fight for our freedom. As the Council's flagship began to retreat, humanity's fleet pushed forward, knowing that this was only the first step in a greater struggle. The rage of Earth had only just begun, and no force in the galaxy would ever be able to silence it again. The message was clear to the galaxy. Earth would no longer be ignored. The humans had found their voice, and that voice would echo through the stars. The stars above Earth now seemed like a distant memory. The war had consumed the galaxy, and for humanity, every victory came at a heavy cost. The Galactic Council's forces had retreated, but they would not give up so easily. Earth had proven itself a formidable enemy, but the question remained: what price would humanity pay for this freedom? Back on Earth, the rebel leaders convened in secrecy, deep within the mountain bunkers built for the worst-case scenarios. The human fleet had won several skirmishes, but there was still no guarantee they could survive the full force of the Council's retaliation. Admiral Kara Miles paced in front of her officers, her mind racing with doubt and determination. The Council had been forced into retreat, but they were already regrouping. The human fleet had been damaged, and Earth's defenses were stretched thin. They had won the battle, but how long could they hold their ground? "We've pushed them back, but I don't know if we can keep this up much longer," Kara said, her voice heavy with the weight of responsibility. "If the Council regroups, they will come at us with everything they have." One of the officers stepped forward, his face grim. "What if we go on the offensive? We know they won't stop until Earth is destroyed." Kara shook her head. "An offensive strike might be too risky. We don't know how strong their remaining forces are." Dr. Selena March was working tirelessly in the Earth Defense Research Facility, analyzing data from the final battle. The human fleet had managed to outsmart the Council, but at great cost. The planet's resources were dwindling, and humanity was facing the harsh truth that the galactic rebellion they had sparked would soon demand everything they had. But Dr. March knew something no one else did. There was still hope. A secret defense technology she had been developing, one that could turn the tide of the war, was almost ready for activation. The technology, however, came with its own risks. In the midst of these struggles, General Thomas Graves stood on the edge of a precipice. The once loyal commander had become one of the traitors who sided with the Council, believing their power would keep humanity in line. But as the battle unfolded, Graves was beginning to realize the horrible truth. The Council was not a savior. It was a tyrannical force. Graves had watched humanity's resilience firsthand. The human fleet, battered and broken, had fought back against the Council's superior technology. And in that fight, Graves had begun to see that the Council's control over Earth was not about peace. It was about subjugation. The Galactic Council had no interest in peace. They wanted total domination. Graves stood on the balcony of his command ship, watching Earth's struggle unfold in the distance. For the first time in his life, he questioned everything. "I was wrong," he whispered to himself. "We were wrong." Back on Earth, Director Gavin Cross was still working behind the scenes, coordinating every possible effort to keep humanity's defenses intact. His eyes were on the status report, which showed the cost of their rebellion. An almost destroyed fleet, a weakened economy, and cities torn apart by constant fighting. Humanity had chosen to defy the Galactic Council, but now they had to face the consequences of their rebellion. "The cost of freedom has always been high," Cross murmured, his fingers rubbing the back of his neck. "But I won't let them take it from us." He turned toward the window of his office, watching as the human fleet continued its work in space. Earth had shown the Council that it was no longer a planet to be bullied. They had made their stand, but at what cost? In space, the human fleet was preparing for another assault. Admiral Kara Miles was resolute. "We need to hit them before they hit us again," she said to her officers. "This isn't just about survival. It's about showing the galaxy that humanity won't back down." The Council's retaliation was coming. It was clear that they would not accept Earth's defiance without paying a price. And humanity, as much as they had fought for their freedom, was now standing on the edge. A new war was on the horizon, one where the future of Earth and its people would be decided. The stakes were higher than ever, and humanity had to decide what it was willing to sacrifice to ensure its survival. Would they fight to the end, or would the cost of rebellion be too great? The galaxy was watching as Earth stood tall, determined to never be ruled again. The true battle was not just one of weapons and fleets. It was a battle for humanity's soul. The battle for Earth was no longer just a fight for survival. It had become a fight for humanity's soul. In space, humanity's fleet was battered, but it was not broken. The Council's forces had underestimated the strength of the human spirit. The last few skirmishes had been hard won, but now humanity's wrath was burning brighter than ever. They had been pushed too far, and now they were ready to unleash everything they had. Admiral Kara Miles stood on the Vengeance, staring at the vast emptiness of space. The battle was no longer about just fighting back. It was about defying the galactic oppression humanity had faced for far too long. The Council had made its move. Now it was Earth's turn to show the galaxy that they would not be controlled. "They want to crush us," Kara said to her crew, her voice steady but tinged with rage. "But we are human, and that makes us stronger than anything they've ever faced." The bridge crew nodded in agreement. They knew the stakes. The Council had already torn through the human fleet once, but humanity had risen from the ashes. Now they were ready to show the galaxy that the rage of Earth was more than just a spark. It was a flame that could never be extinguished. Back on Earth, Dr. Selena March was working with the Resistance to activate the final phase of the defense system, the one she had designed in secret, hoping she would never need it. But now, it was Earth's last hope. She had learned the hard way that relying on the Council was a fatal mistake. Earth had spent centuries building alliances and accumulating power, yet the Council had come to strip them of everything. The moment they dared to cross that line, it had ignited something deep within humanity. And now Earth was fighting with everything it had. "We are more than just survivors," Dr. March said to the gathered Resistance leaders. "We are the last hope of this galaxy. We will stand tall or we will fall fighting, but we will not back down." In the distant council chambers, the galactic leaders had begun to realize they had made a grave mistake. They had misunderstood humanity's resilience. They thought Earth was a weak, primitive species, but humanity had proven them wrong. They had proven that they could not be silenced no matter the odds. General Zarek, a ruthless leader of the Council's fleet, sat in his command chair, staring at the holographic display of the human fleet. The humans were unrelenting, each strike more devastating than the last. His fleet was getting worn down, but he could still sense the human spirit fighting back with a fire that had once been considered unthinkable. "We cannot allow them to survive this. They must be crushed once and for all," Zarek said, his voice cold. Send everything we have. Meanwhile, in the heart of the battle, the Vengeance fought its way through the chaos, pushing back against the Council's overwhelming force. Kara Miles's fingers moved with precision, directing her fleet to outmaneuver the enemy. The human ships were smaller, faster, and more adaptable than the Council's massive vessels. But it wasn't just their tactics that made them strong. It was their will. Kara stood firm, her eyes locked onto the view screen as her fleet continued to press forward. Every single soldier, every crew member, every person on Earth knew the stakes. This was no longer about victory for Earth alone. This was about the galaxy's future. If humanity fell, the entire galaxy would follow. The Council knew that, and so did humanity. "This is more than just a battle," Kara said, her voice resonating through the ship's comm system. "This is a declaration. We will never bow to anyone again." The Council, seeing the tide beginning to turn, launched their ultimate weapon, the Doomstar, a ship so large and powerful that it could wipe out entire planets in one strike. The Doomstar appeared in the distance, casting a long shadow over the battlefield. It was their final weapon, the one they had been saving for this moment. But humanity was ready. The human fleet had been waiting for this. And when the Doomstar finally arrived, the humans unleashed the last phase of their secret weapon, the energy pulse developed by Dr. March. Dr. March and her team initiated the pulse, and for a brief moment, everything went silent. A wave of energy rippled through space, hitting the Doomstar directly. The massive ship shuddered as the pulse hit its systems, disrupting the weapons, shields, and engines. The Doomstar was no longer the powerful force it had once been. It was now a sitting target. Kara Miles saw her chance and gave the order. "Attack! This is it. We finish it now." The human fleet surged forward, their weapons firing at the vulnerable Doomstar, delivering blow after blow. The massive ship began to break apart, its once imposing hull now crumbling under the relentless assault. The Council's forces, though numerous, were finally in full retreat. The Doomstar had been destroyed, and with it, the last hope the Council had of crushing humanity's defiance. The galaxy had witnessed humanity's unmatched resolve, a species that had once been seen as weak, now standing as the galactic power. But the battle wasn't over. Humanity's wrath had been unleashed, and now the galaxy would know the consequences of crossing the line with Earth. The battle was over, but the true test was only just beginning. The Doomstar, the ultimate weapon of the Galactic Council, had been destroyed, but the galaxy's balance had been shattered. Humanity had struck a blow against the Council that would be felt for eons to come. The stars above Earth were still, but the war was far from over. The darkness that had sought to crush Earth's future was now retreating. But it hadn't disappeared. "Admiral," Kara Miles stood on the Vengeance's bridge looking out at the stars. Earth's fleet had won a great victory, but victory didn't always mean peace. The Council had been humiliated, their forces scattered, but they were not gone. Humanity had proven itself capable of great things, but now they had to decide how to use their newfound power. Kara clenched her fists. "We've sent them a message, but this isn't over yet," she muttered under her breath. The Council would regroup, and the galaxy would remember how Earth had defied them. It was only a matter of time before the darkness came back. But Kara wasn't concerned with what was coming next. Earth had stood strong against the galactic powers, and now they would make sure that no one ever threatened them again. Humanity was no longer just a survivor. They were a force that no one would forget. Dr. Selena March, still reeling from the devastation of the battle, had just finished activating the final defense systems. Earth's shield network, powered by ancient technology, was now fully operational. The energy that had surged through the systems was enough to protect Earth from any future attacks. But there was one problem. Earth wasn't alone anymore. The human fleet had destroyed the Doomstar, but the Council still controlled most of the galaxy's territories. For the first time, Earth had the upper hand, but Dr. March knew that such power was a double-edged sword. "The real war starts now," Dr. March said to herself, gazing at the data feeds. "We've made an enemy of the entire galaxy. They won't just forget what we did today. As the council regrouped, they were left with two choices: attack Earth with everything they had or negotiate for peace. But both options had their consequences. General Zarak, still shaken by the loss of the Doomstar, had finally come to terms with the reality of the situation. The Council was no longer the untouchable power it once was. Humanity had changed everything. Zarak stood in the council chambers, his fists clenched at his sides as he addressed the gathered leaders. We underestimated them. Humanity is no longer the weak, insignificant species we thought they were. They are now a threat we cannot ignore. A voice from the back of the room spoke, soft but resolute. Then we must strike again. We cannot allow them to grow any further. Zarak turned to the speaker, his eyes narrowing. And what would you suggest we do? We've lost the battle. Humanity has proven their worth. If we push them further, they may come for us next. Back on Earth, Director Gavin Cross addressed a global broadcast, the weight of leadership pressing down on him. The victory over the Council was huge, but it had come at a cost. Millions of lives had been lost in the battle, and Earth's resources were drained. Now, humanity had to decide what kind of future it wanted to create. This victory is not the end. We are the architects of a new galaxy now. We will rebuild Earth, and we will defend it from any force that dares to challenge us again. The message was clear. Humanity was no longer the underdog. They had proven that they could survive, and now the universe would have to reckon with them. In the quiet spaces of the galactic void, the darkness was still there, waiting. The entity that had propelled the galactic conflict wasn't finished. It had learned from its losses, and now it was gathering its strength. The shadows were not gone. They had simply retreated into the farthest corners of space, biding their time. The galaxy was in chaos, and as the Council tried to regain control, a new force was rising in the far reaches of the universe: humanity. Earth had been the final battleground, but now it was the beginning of a new era, one in which humanity's rage would light the way. The Guardian stood with Dr. March, watching as the first rays of a new dawn broke over Earth. Humanity's fight was far from over, but this time they had something different. They had the light of purpose, a determination to defend their home from any power that sought to take it. The darkness will return, the Guardian said quietly. But humanity will be ready. The light of Earth will shine brighter than ever before. Humanity's time had come. The war had not been won in space, with weapons and ships. It had been won in the hearts of the people of Earth. They had chosen to stand up for themselves, to defend their planet and their future, no matter the cost. But now, as the universe watched, Earth had to decide how to wield its new power. Would they stay in the shadows, or would they rise to lead the galaxy toward something better? As Earth's future was shaped in the stars, one thing was clear: humanity had earned its place, and they would fight for it until the end. The universe had shifted. Once seen as a small, insignificant world on the edge of the galaxy, Earth had now become a symbol of defiance, resilience, and strength. Humanity had faced the full force of the Galactic Council, and they had survived. But this victory was not just about winning a battle. It was about changing the course of history. The Yado Council had fallen. The Galactic Council that had once ruled over the galaxy with a cold, calculating hand now lay broken. Humanity's defiance had set a new course for the future, and Earth was no longer a pawn in someone else's game. Earth was now a power. Admiral Kara Miles stood at the bridge of the Vengeance, looking out over the stars. Earth's victory was no longer just about the Council's defeat. It was about what came next. The dawn of a new era for humanity, and the responsibility of ensuring it was sustained. "We've won," she said quietly to herself. "But now we have to build." Kara turned to her officers, who stood at attention. "The galaxy is watching. We have to make sure this victory isn't wasted. Humanity's place in the stars is no longer questioned. We will lead, not through force, but through strength and unity." Back on Earth, Director Gavin Cross addressed the United Nations, the global broadcast reaching every corner of the planet. Humanity's victory had been achieved, but now the hard work began. The Council's retreat had left behind a galaxy in chaos, and Earth had to decide what role it would play. "This is not the end of the fight," Cross declared, his voice strong. "We have proved ourselves, but the real challenge starts now. How will we shape the future of the galaxy?" The decision was clear. Humanity had made a powerful enemy, but they had also earned the right to decide their own future. Earth would be a leader, and that meant more than just military strength. It meant finding ways to unite the fractured galaxy and forge new alliances. But humanity was also aware of the dangers. The darkness that had nearly consumed them was not gone. It was waiting somewhere in the deepest corners of the galaxy, biding its time. And when it returned, humanity had to be ready. Dr. Selena March continued her work in the Earth Defense Research Facility, overseeing the integration of the new defense systems humanity had developed during the war. The pulse that had turned the tide in the battle against the Council was now humanity's greatest weapon, a defensive shield that would ensure Earth's protection. But Dr. March also understood that this technology would be key in the coming battles against the true enemy. The Guardian, standing beside her, had already begun his own preparations. His power, once thought to be just a legend, was now the greatest ally humanity had in its ongoing struggle. "The darkness will return, Selena," the Guardian said, his voice low, filled with ancient wisdom. "But you have a light now, a light that will lead the way. Never forget, it is your resolve, your unity, that will keep the galaxy from falling." In the far reaches of the galaxy, remnants of the Galactic Council still lingered. General Zarak and other high-ranking officials knew they had lost, but they were not yet defeated. The loss of the Doomstar and the Council's grip on Earth had shaken their entire foundation. But the Council was an organization built on power, and power would find its way back. Zarak, though now weakened, had been studying Earth's rise with fear and respect. He had been part of the Council's elite forces, but now he saw humanity in a new light, a force that could not be ignored. "They will rise," he muttered to himself, standing before a holographic map of the galaxy. "But they will need to unite the galaxy if they are to truly lead. I must ensure their power doesn't become our end." Back on Earth, humanity had begun its reconstruction. The cities that had been damaged during the war were rebuilt stronger than before. The human spirit, the same spirit that had defied the Council, was now focused on peace, unity, and defense. Earth had won, but they were fully aware that their new role in the galaxy would be tested again. The United Earth Fleet was reorganized, not just for defense, but to serve as a symbol of hope for all the civilizations that had once looked at Earth with scorn. The time of humanity's isolation was over. Now they would take their place as leaders among the stars. The message humanity sent was clear. No one could break their spirit, and no one would ever dare to treat them as inferior again. As the years passed, Earth's influence spread across the galaxy. New alliances were formed, and old rivals began to see Earth not just as a planet to be conquered, but as a force to be respected. Humanity had changed the course of history. The Galactic Council was now a shadow of its former self, and Earth stood as a beacon of freedom. Humanity had earned its place. The galaxy would no longer look at Earth with disdain. The rage that had once defined them was now their strength, and that strength would see them through the challenges ahead. The darkness had not been eradicated, but it had been pushed back. And now, as the galaxy watched Earth's rise, they understood one thing: humanity would not be ignored again.